This episode contains discussions surrounding mental health. If at any point during the episode you or someone you know is in need of support, call 988 or visit iasp.info for help. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, friends, whoever is tuning in to this episode of the Make Mental podcast, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart and everyone involved at Make Mental, thank you very much. I need like a Staples easy button at this point. Bam, we have another great guest on today. And I want to take a second to highlight Jonathan. It's impressive that anyone is willing to come on and speak about their mental health. But being a male identifying human, it's very impressive when I meet another male who wants to come on, share their journeys, share their story. The more I get into this podcast, the more difficult I find it becomes to find men that want to speak on their story, not men that want to reach out to me to let me know that what I'm doing is good, what we're doing at Make Mental is good, but ones that actually want to come on, share their journey, or in Jonathan's case, have their own platform as well. So thank you for coming on, Jonathan. Would you like to just give us a quick update to let the listeners know who you are, what you're all about, and then we can kind of dive in more to what you got going on and the fun sport you play?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you, Caleb, for having me on and for your platform as well. It's really cool to see how the mental health community kind of rallies around one another. So, saying that, my name is Jonathan Curran. I am a fifth year graduate student and senior on the St. Mary's College of California men's golf team. I am originally from Scottsdale, Arizona, but I've spent all 5 years up here in Northern California. I've loved every second of it. It's been difficult at times. COVID happened in my freshman year, so definitely a very different college experience than most. Um, but wouldn't have traded anything for the world. Very grateful for my process and some of the initiatives that I've been able to kind of lead as well. As Caleb mentioned, I started my own platform podcast called Stories by Student Athletes around May of last year. So we're coming up on a year, but very similar to what Make Mental does, and really just grateful to have this opportunity.
Yeah, I appreciate the point of the mental health community kind of rallying against each other. Yeah, that would be counterproductive. Rallying around each other. I mean, yeah, you never know. There's a little rivalry. No, I'm kidding. That's what's nice about this community is like when one of us succeeds, all of us succeed. You know, when our message is out there, that's what means most to us. So whether it's on my platform here, and again, what we've got going over here at Make Mental, or on Stories by Student Athletes, which we will definitely get into, check it out. Right? I mean, if you aren't at the point where you can share your story, you might as well listen to someone who's going through something similar or has a different point of view or the same point of view if you need to reinforce some things in your life. So when one of us wins, we all win. And I guess we could jump right into it. Stories by Student Athletes, was that something that was always in the cards for you, or was it something that kind of presented itself because of the struggles you were facing, similarly to my experience?
Completely not in the cards for me. Um, it wasn't even my idea. It was someone in my close circle who we were just talking, completely his idea. We were talking about ways to give back. This was kind of after my mental hurdles, after some of the trying times in my story so far. We're finding ways to give back because that's a really huge part of who I am. And it was his idea that we could start a podcast, kind of share my story. Um, I didn't think much of it, to be honest. And then it kind of hit me all of a sudden once he said that. And then it was such a huge idea for me that kind of like took hold of my mind so much that I like legitimately like stopped everything that I was doing. I went to Target, bought a whiteboard, kind of whiteboarded it all out, what I was going to do. I'm very much of a like when something gets my mind, it's like, all right, let's write it down and let's see it through. Um, so it was just one of those things where I bought a whiteboard. I like literally, it's still hanging up on my wall in my room. Um, and that's really how it came to fruition. I'm sure we'll get more into the origin story behind it and everything along those lines. But essentially, what Stories by Student Athletes does is it just gives a platform for current and retired student athletes to share their story how they want it to be shared, not to have other people kind of looked to have other people look at them a certain way because they're an athlete, because they're a certain type of sport player, whatever sport that they play. But to give the platform for student athletes to share who they are, how they want it to be shared, and it's been a really rewarding experience so far.
That is fantastic. I think authenticity goes a long way, anytime, but especially in current times when it's so easy to take a 10-second clip from an hour long conversation and then have your reputation a certain way, good or bad. Sometimes it happens both ways. So the fact that you can give light and really a whole community the chance to just be them true selves without judgment, and then in turn create a support system for them if that's something that they're longing is really beautiful. And I appreciate what you do over there, which is really excited why I'm to how it which is why I am really excited to have you on. Holy smokes, we're on like coffee number 4 today, so words are coming at me fast. But
Yeah.
what I've noticed even just from like the first couple minutes of really chatting with you is you're very intentional about the things that you do. Does that come from somewhere? Does it stem from your sport? Is it who you are? What is the intentionality that really drove you to Stories by Student Athletes?
It's really who I am, and the biggest part of me is my faith. So you can't separate me and my faith at all. Like that's just not who I am, right? I view my life as God living through me, and that's a huge part of everything that I do because it's literally like when I get out of bed in the morning and plant my feet on the ground, it's like, all right, I'm like here for a reason. Like let's bring it today, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So I really try to carry that in everything that I do. Sport has definitely emphasized that. I never played golf, or that's a lie. I didn't. Golf was not my main sport growing up. My dad played, so I would go out there with him when I could. But I was a baseball player. I loved it. That was my dream. Still is my first love. Like I still look at myself as a baseball player who just plays golf now. That's how much I love it, and that's like really, like that's how I grew up as an athlete. That's the mindset that I still have. Um, it just got to a point where around freshman year of high school for me, I'd gotten hurt a couple of times. I hate losing, and sometimes that's a little tough because being on a team is it's out of your control a couple of times, right? Where you don't. That's a beauty in a team sport, but it's also um, like I wanted the responsibility and the outcome to be on me, and that is a huge part of golf, right? It's no one else is up there hitting the shots for you. You can't run, you can't hide. Like you're pretty much out there by yourself, and it's you against the golf course and you against everyone else. And that's really what drove me to golf. But saying that, I was behind the eight ball in terms of time and college recruiting, where I was playing against kids who had played since they were 3 or 4 years old, and here I am, kind of like a 12-year-old kid, just kind of getting my feet wet in it. So I really had to be intentional with everything that I did. Like every single day after school, I would go straight to the golf course, right? Pretty much I'm there till sunset, but I had to get through those lessons and get through the early stages quicker. And because of that, I had to be aware of what I was doing. Like I couldn't waste a day, anything along those lines. So I think that's one thing that's really stuck with me throughout my kind of junior career, my golf career up to this point as well, but really just in life in general.
Yeah, some could say you retired to the retiree sport a little sooner than most.
That's a good point.
No, but it's funny that you say. Well, I guess it's not funny. It's ironic that you say like losing is not what really is in the cards for you, but it's inevitable at the same time,
Yeah.
especially when golf is your new sport and has been your sport for a while. Like, yeah, I mean, it's tough because baseball, right? There is a team, but still the pitcher's involved in every play and the catcher's involved in every play. And that's the only guarantee. Like, you could be chilling in right field, wait for your moment to come and drop it after the pitcher just struck out two people. And then there's the game. I don't know what position you played, but it really translates to golf for in the sense of like you're the only one involved in every play. You hit the shot, and then all of a sudden, I don't like a big gust of wind comes out of nowhere. Someone who doesn't understand basically the unwritten rules of golf screams when you're about to swing. Like someone sneezes, a phone goes off. Like there's those uncontrollables. How do you manage that in golf, but also in life? I know you mentioned faith, but is there anything else that helps you really get a hold of it's okay to not have control?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've started to realize, and I'm not saying that I'm good at it by any means. Like the only way to really gain control is to lose control for sure. Um, there's a lot of parts that come into my faith with that, but understanding that I can take accountability for everything, but there are some things that are still out of my control. Um, However, I do believe that everything works for my good still, right? So understanding that it doesn't matter necessarily what the outcome is, as long as I can remain accountable to myself, focus on what I'm doing, um, I'm going to get to where I want to go. And that's not necessarily an outcome. It's more so the person that I am, right? I Winning is great for sure. Obviously, like that's as an athlete you want to win. But being like a true champion, carrying yourself in a way that like it doesn't matter if you win or you lose because you just are that person. Like you are the champion and you kind of embody everything that a winning person kind of lives for. That's really the true win is being that person and not just the outcome. Um, and golf kind of serves as a microcosm for life in that sense, where it's if you work hard, and it's kind of athletics in general. You work hard in your sport, you train the right way, you believe in yourself the right way. More times than not, the outcome is going to be good. Um, but then again, like sport's going to end at some point, and you got to carry that over into life, right? And it's if you it can be as simple as eating the right foods, getting up at the right time, saying no to certain things. You're going to live the life that you want to live and you're going to be the person that you want to be more times than not. So I think taking accountability over myself when it comes to golf and life in general, that's huge.
Go Global is a free flowing technology company that handcrafts, embellishes, and manufactures garments and accessories. Designed on the principles of people, places, and possibilities, Go Global reimagines fashion and is inspired by you, the people of the world. Yeah, that is massive. And I think you hit the nail on the head in sports in general. They are just a portrait of life, right? Like you can train your entire life for something for you since you're 12, like 10, 15, 20 years for anyone listening to this. And then, like I said, you can't control the weather on the day. You could prepare as best as possible, and the conditions of the course, if you're in golf, are not what you expected. I mean, and anything that's outside of what you've prepared for, what you can do on match day, game day, meet day, whatever sport you play, you just have to be okay with you knowing that you did everything possible to get yourself to a certain moment, and that just because that moment might not go the way you expected, everything is now not done, right? Like you still have, I mean, 99.9% of the time, obviously there's extreme outliers, you still have that chance to wake up the next day and keep moving forward, try and put yourself in the best spot possible for that next match, that next meet, that next game, or if it's your last game, that next step of life, as you alluded to. You are a fifth year senior
Yeah.
grad student. I went through this not too long ago. What is this like for you, knowing that I'm not going to say your last ever match, but your last ever extremely highly competitive match unless you're blessed enough to continue to play post college. But like this environment of just being around, I don't know, 10, 12, 20 like-minded individuals sharing a lot of memories and laughs. What is this like for you to know like this is the last ride here?
It's something that's definitely been hitting me hard for sure in the last few months, to be honest, and it's getting realer and realer as this year's starting to come to a close. I mean, we're still in peak season, and there's a lot of stuff going on for sure. So it's not time to hang it up by any means. We're if anything, kind of ramping up right now. But in 2 months' time, like I'll be done here at St. Mary's relatively with the athletics. Um, and that has been kind of a hard bullet to swallow a little bit. My therapist and I meet with him like once a week. He has been instrumental in who I am now. Um, so highly recommend therapy. Absolutely. I think that you can't go wrong there. Um, but kind of realizing the transition and getting ahead of it, not leaving it until kind of when the moment is actually happening. Like we've been planning for it now for a couple of months, and like we're having the conversations about what I want to do afterwards and how I'm going to set up my day now instead of you know we have class and we have practice and then it's dinner and then it's homework and then it's sleep, right? A lot of times
Yeah.
as student athletes, our schedule is set for us. And we never really have ever put together our own schedule for a day in like our entire life until after college athletics, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
most of us played some type of athletics growing up, which means that we followed the same schedule: school, sport, dinner, homework, sleep. Essentially, we've been doing the same stuff for 20 plus years. But what happens when that's kind of when that part of your life is over and you go into a new step? It's like you kind of have to relearn how to go from place to place, thing to thing. And that's one of the things that we're starting to talk about. Um, so, learning how to find new ways to kind of be in purpose, to find something exciting to do, right? Something to look forward to. Because golf practice isn't going to get you up out of bed in a couple of months, right? But you still have to get up. So, what are you what are you looking for? That's one of the things that we've talked about a lot, but it has been tough. It's a little sad. Um, I've been blessed to be very involved here at St. Mary's, whether it be in our campus SAC, just athletic department in general. Very grateful to kind of been involved over my years, but that's kind of leaving in a few months as well. So that part is sad. However, uh, in order to kind of take hold of what this next chapter has for me in life, like you kind of have to take your hands off of this chapter, right? So it's also beautiful in the moment because there's so many more beautiful things coming down the road that I might not necessarily know yet, but um, they're there eventually.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I want to hit on in that beautiful
Mm-hmm.
answer of yours. I think you answered probably 10 questions I had in my head as they arose. So you're keeping me on my toes. One thing I wanted to highlight though is you said most of us who have been involved in college athletics have been playing or coaching or just around it for 20 plus years. That's a lot of time. How how do you grasp the concept of okay, I'm not going to have it all figured out 2 weeks after my sport is done, even though I've been planning for X amount of months. Like that's something I still struggle with today, right? I've, I still have my life still revolves around soccer in some capacity because I still have the privilege of coaching, but I'm most likely getting ready to leave that within the year as well. Like I couldn't let go of my sport. So I kind of weaned my way off it. That's what I'm working with my therapist and like yours, she's phenomenal, my therapist. But how are you I guess, managing or starting to grasp the concept that I'm not going to have it figured out possibly even a year after it's done?
Yeah, I think the best way for me to describe being a student athlete almost to other people is that 100% of us dream of an outcome that 98% of us don't ever accomplish in
Mm-hmm.
playing professional sports. And if you look at it from like an investment standpoint, because I was business finance my undergrad, you would never ever take an investment that hits 2% of the time, right? That is not a good risk reward. However, right, it's not an investment, it's our life. Um, we love doing it, right? And that love has to be present in our lives moving forward, right? There has to be, you can't just turn that off, right? You can't just turn off the last 20 years. And you have to find ways to kind of integrate that into other aspects of your life. Like for you, like I would imagine you can't just turn off being a soccer player. You can't turn off being competitive. Like for me, you can't turn off being an athlete. You can't turn off a baseball player, a golfer, anything. Like you just can't turn off that side of me. So it's more so finding a different outlet to use it in, whether it's in work or whatever down the line. Finding different outlets is going to be huge for me, I think. I don't necessarily know some of the, like, obviously the specifics and how it's going to work out. I do know some of the bigger picture things, and where I'm going, but it's definitely new. And I think the best thing that I know is like I'm still going to be me. Like I'm still
Mm.
going to put in the same amount of work on myself in my community. Like I'm not just a product of my environment or what I'm doing. Like I kind of dictate it. And that's that kind of just knowledge, that reassurance is is huge when it comes to kind of peace. Um, I'm kind of at peace, and wherever I go, that's where I'm supposed to go, and I'm going to be the same person wherever I go. So I'm sure there will be more difficulties when they arrive for sure, but being willing to face them and to overcome them and who I am, that's there's a lot of peace that comes in it as well.
Empire Specialty Printing is a family owned and operated screen printing and promotional products company. ESP has been in business for over a decade by providing consistent and high quality service. Products include custom hoodies, shirts, hats, business supplies, and much, much more. Whether it's for a family party, school team, group, or corporate apparel, Empire Specialty Printing has what you need to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and I think another component of that is just being where you're at, being present.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's going to be challenges down the road, but you still have arguably the most important part of your final season left. Like you don't want to just fly through that, right?
Yeah.
And this is what makes mental health so beautifully scary is that you don't want to miss where you are presently, but you also don't want to end up in the wrong spot in the future. And simultaneously, you're worrying about your choices that you made in the past. If you have anxiety like me, it's like, dude, just deep breath. You like you said, you can't control that. Someday it's going to be the last day that you competitively pick up a golf club, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think something else you've mentioned in your past two answers here, your past two reflections, has been community and connections, whether it's been through your student athlete advisory committee, through your baseball team, through your golf teammates. I'm sure through your family, through your faith, there is some sense of camaraderie and belonging. That is a massive part to self discovery. And I think a lot of times, at least I know I did, I had it reverse. I thought I had to separate myself from everyone in order to figure
Mm-hmm.
out myself. And I'm not saying that doesn't work because for you, the COVID experience was freshman year. For me, it was sophomore into junior year. And it was like, I got a precursor to what life was going to look like without sports, as we all did. But like, it was just, I looked at it as a time to be like, okay, I can't play right now. And I had nothing to do, right? I had just the housemates I live with, which is a fine community. I'm not going to sit here and shit on them. but it was just like I lost 20 other of my best friends. I
Yeah.
couldn't really go see my grandparents as often as I'd liked. It was just like, if I don't do something else, this is what life will look like after sports for me, minus my job and those variables you mentioned. What was the COVID experience for you in terms of your mental health? Was it a period to give you reflection? Was it an eye opener? Was it confirming that you were on the right path? I know it affected us all very similarly, but again, it was such an individual experience. What was COVID like for you?
I think it really just changed my college experience in that it delayed some of the typical stages that you go through. Um, the like I came in very independent for sure. As we talked about, very intentional, right? I'm not going around like I wasn't just going to parties just to go to parties. Um, at the time, I was in a long distance relationship, so I wasn't really entertaining anything along those lines as well. So it was really school, golf, food, homework, sleep. Like that was it. um, like I would, what's one of my best friends who I ended up having throughout undergrad lived right across the hall from me and didn't know me at all the first semester because we were just never there. Um, and my freshman roommate loved the guy, but he was an international student. Very different culture. He's from Macau, which is very close to Hong Kong, and very different. He was a little homesick. He was looking for people who were from his type of culture that he could identify with as well. So it left me in a little bit of a lonely spot for a time. And then COVID hits after I start to make a little bit more friendships there, the second semester of freshman year. I move off campus sophomore year immediately. And as a second year, I lived with three fifth years and a sixth year on the golf team. So I lived with three guys who were 3 years older than me in school and one guy who was 4 years older than me. And these are guys like, it'd essentially be like me living with a freshman right now. And there's just a significant gap there, right? There's experiences that you miss out on. These guys have been friends and kind of brothers now for 4 years, and I'm just kind of the young buck in the house who doesn't drink, right? And all these guys like they like to kind of sit back and have a drink on the weekends, and I wasn't like that at all. So that kind of isolated me a little bit more. Um, I spent a lot of time by myself. Um, I loved that house to death. Like I love those guys still, but I mean, just a little different in that couldn't really relate to them too much. Um, so that's kind of sophomore and junior year in that sense. Some of my mental struggles were kind of disguised in that moment, in that I didn't have an outlet, didn't have anyone to really talk to. And I was always the person where, like, I'm not talking, like, screw that. Like, I'm not doing it. And it's not because I thought that it was weak, it's just not for me. Um, However, I started to get more and more into the community here at St. Mary's, starting to get more and more involved. However, just never really let that side of me out. Um, so starting to kind of put some masks on in a bit where no one's really seeing the true Jonathan yet, but it's nothing crazy really. Um, that's kind of how COVID sparked maybe some of it, and where I was by myself a little bit. And I like being by myself, don't get me wrong, but when you're by yourself for so much, it's a little much. Um, Especially in a sport like golf where it's very consuming, and your performance is, because there's not a team aspect to it, it's all you. And if you don't play well, you can easily bring your sport into your life outside of your sport. And that if I played golf, I hated myself. It was like there was a point where it's like if I'm playing bad, it's like I'm not eating because I'm not rewarding myself for playing bad. Like that's kind of the extremes where it would go to. It's like you have to earn certain things. Like you have to earn the right, not necessarily the right to eat. That's a little much. Um, but some things that I would hold myself to for sure. And then comes senior year. So this is last year. The fall semester went great for me from the outside. I was killing it in golf. It was the best golf I'd played so far. Um, Best school. Like I was killing it in school, killing it in leadership activities. This was a time where like I'm SAC co-president. I'm our conference SAC representative, starting to get more and more recognition on a national scale. Um, so in all aspects, killing it. And kind of like behind closed doors, you like couldn't look at myself in the mirror, like just don't know who I am because you just go from one thing to one thing to the other, and then you just lose track of yourself. Um, there were a couple of clear moments for me that kind of really hit hard. There was like my freshman roommate. I lived with him again senior year. I was driving him to the airport, and he was just kind of like, we were just talking about the last semester, and he was really impressed with how well I had played, and he was asking me on how I made all these kind of great changes, and I was kind of ready to break down and cry the entire ride because I was like, I don't know who I am right now, and I didn't want to talk about that kind of stuff. So I ended up dropping him off, and then kind of cried the whole way home. But then that was in the fall. In the spring, I wasn't playing good golf, and that was kind of the tip of the iceberg because as many athletes go through, it's that identity crisis, and um, sports is kind of all I'm doing. Like this is who I am, and I'm failing in that right now. So what good am I? Essentially, it's like if there's one thing that I'm supposed to be good at, and I'm not good at it right now, like what? Like who am I? Like what's happening? And it was a really clear moment for me in that. Um, I think it was like a Sunday morning or something like that. But I'm just like, I'm talking to my parents on the phone and just like weeping, like throwing water bottles in my car, like punching the steering wheel. I just like lost it. Um, and people like that's the rock bottom moment that people go through. Everyone kind of has one of those moments, and it was then that I knew, and my parents knew that like there needed to be some extra help there. Like I needed to start to have other people help me out. Um, so that's why community is so important to me because I couldn't have done it on my own. Like that best friend who I was talking about who lived across the hall freshman year, he came over and made sure I was okay the whole day until my parents flew out to come pick me up essentially, and I had to go home for a week and a half. Like middle of my golf season, middle of school, I had to leave everything behind, kind of like remove myself from everything for 10 days probably, um, just to get a grip on some stuff. And that's really where my mental health story starts. I feel like that's kind of the events that led to the breakdown, but the breakdown isn't the story. The story is
Mm-hmm.
the process that like what happens afterwards. How do you use what happens to you for the good of other people? And that's where my podcast has come into play. That's where everything that I try to do on social media and just the person that I try to be, that's where it really stems from.
Yeah, again, one of your sayings that I find everywhere when I look up your name is pain into platform, and I think
Yeah.
that sums up right now where you are beautifully. Because as you've alluded to, you don't know. You have a general direction of where you're going, but we don't. We just don't know. Um, I'm curious though. I feel like I was literally looking into a mirror at some points when you were describing situations. I didn't necessarily the anger component is not something that I experience often. I'm usually don't get super angry. I mean, but when I do, oh boy, like stay out of the way.
Exactly.
But it was more along the lines of when you were talking about like you would just go from one thing to the next, just habitually almost. And when you're succeeding in all of those things, you're not going to stop, right? Humans are very reward oriented. We just are. Like if you're feeling good and people are telling you you're doing good, you're not going to stop doing that thing, even if it's damaging you on the inside. And you just put on a smile, keep going, which those are two admirable things. But when you start to lose track of who you are, it just becomes blurry. That's when it gets tough. And I'm curious to know, in your experience, was the weight of others' expectations something that weighed on you a lot? Because we do have expectations for ourselves, which is healthy to a certain point. But I want to know what others' expectations were of you and how that played an impact on your mental health.
I think they inadvertently did play an impact. And it's a blessing in disguise to have high expectations from other people. That's not something I trade for the world, right? That means that you're doing something right. But there is pressure to perform. And that is certainly part of athletics because at the end of the day, you do have to perform. However, when it is strictly an association of a person to an outcome, that's when it gets a little too much. The extra weight of having communities back home holding me to a really high expectation. Right, as I mentioned, it's beautiful because like I want to be associated with really good stuff, but it was even more so like I have to hide certain things that aren't going well at the time, because leadership has just always come easy to me, to be honest. And I say that as humbly as I can. Like every team that I've been a part of throughout high school, throughout younger teams, like I've always found a way to be a leader to make a big impact on it. Um, and because of that, people had always just associated that with me. Um, however, it's like sometimes like vulnerability isn't associated with leadership. Showing showing weakness, right, isn't associated with it, which is a load of crap because being authentic isn't weakness at all, it's strength. Um, however, it's like people know you to be a certain way and you don't want to let them down for sure, but the fear of letting other people down can't outweigh the fear of letting you down, right? You have to be you regardless.
Yes, so many parallels I want to draw from what you just mentioned, and I'll start with I read a book by Ivy Watts, and she's a phenomenal author and speaker. And she said in her book, she took a quote from someone else. So it's like, I don't know whose quote it is, but it says that even sunshine burns if you get too much, which I think just struck a chord with me because, and I think it will with you because, like, if you're succeeding in every part of your life, you forget how wonderful sitting under a tree in the shade is, right? Like everyone wants sunshine. Like we all want to be tan, get our vitamin D, just start chilling in all these warm places. But like too much of it is not good for you either. And I think that is a hard pill to swallow, knowing that you can't be perfect or succeed in every aspect of your life. And you shouldn't be expected to. For someone who has a leadership mindset such as yours, for someone who at one point took winning and losing extremely personally, it sounds like that has to be a hard pill to swallow. And again, I want to get into this because I'm so curious about the mindset it takes to play a sport like golf. We'll transition in a moment. The other point I wanted to make, since faith is very important to you, is, as I'm sure you're aware, even Jesus couldn't carry his cross alone.
Yeah.
And I think that is a powerful picture that even the person in our religion, or the human form of the main entity in our religion, couldn't bear the weight of humanity on their own in what was close to their final moments. Did that ever come up in your mind at all when you were thinking about these things? Is like, since faith is something that's massive to you, before we transition to the next part here, I want to know how you leaned on that community, and God to get you through that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think my faith has been super personal, where I'm starting to grow more in how I talk about God and talk about my relationship with Jesus for sure. One of the most important aspects of my faith is, um, not to throw around scripture, but it's like Luke 4, the beginning of Luke 4, and that's when Jesus is tempted. And there are a couple things in there, but the most important part that I gleaned from it is that, like, you have Jesus, who is God, right? And you have, when he's tempted by the enemy, he doesn't answer with, like, I'm God. He answers, it is written, right? He goes back to scripture. And if Jesus is using scripture to fight against temptation, like, why am I trying to fight evil by myself? Right? One of those things. So that's really where my faith took more of a scripture based perspective, and the fact where it's like, I need to learn who God is through his word. And that's how I set up my identity now. That's how I set up everything that I do. That's why I'm so intentional in everything that I do. And it's because I know the source, right? It's like I'm being plugged into the word essentially, and that's how I get recharged. That's one of the really good examples that one of my friends uses. It's like, you gotta be connected to the source, and the source is Jesus through the word. So that's really how my faith is geared up.
Need a tow? Top Shot Transport is the place to go. From cars to machinery, heavy equipment to general freight, Top Shot Transport will give you the best rate. Top Shot Transport is fully licensed and ready to tow your stuff anywhere. Email topshottransport1@gmail.com for more information.
Yeah, can you give us maybe just a quick example of, like, we all have these moments, whether you're super religious or not, where you're just like, oh my goodness, like, how could you let this happen to me? And for us, it's God, but for other people, it's a different person, whatever they believe in. How do you, how do you ultimately, how are you okay with bad things happening to you?
The perfect example in my life is the podcast, Stories by Student Athletes. I mean, mental health is not talked about a lot. It's starting to get talked about more in athletics, which is a beautiful thing. But you are in a we are in a community that is still scared to talk sometimes, and there is a lot of things that don't get said. And it took me breaking apart and building back up to have a platform where almost 20 people have shared their story now and affected tens of thousands of people across the world. And that is like the most rewarding thing of all time. Like, when you look at it from that perspective, it's like, I had to go through a little. This is where pain into platform comes into play. Um, the pain that I went through turned into the platform for others to use. And when you look at it like
Mm,
that, it's like, I'll go through anything. Like,
yeah.
doesn't matter. Like, come on now. Like, you kidding me? Like, if if it's going to affect tens of thousands and hopefully however many people, and one life is going to be saved, as long as it's,
Mm.
if one life gets saved from the pain that I go through, it's worth it. Like, bring it on. Right? That is the example. And so many beautiful things have come as a result of that podcast. Some beautiful relationships, this conversation, specifically my girlfriend, to be honest, we met through the podcast, and our relationship is centered in God, which has been amazing. Um, However, like, it's looking at that podcast, I feel like I'm a living testimony to pain into platform, and that's where the power really comes, when you can recognize that while it's still happening.
Yeah, I appreciate that because, again, you hit it right, like, in the sweet spot of, like, if if I'm not gonna say a little bit of pain because it's different for everyone, but even if it doesn't matter the pain level that you're experiencing. It's still real to you. And I think that's also what stops people from using their voice for good is like, oh, I am not at my story isn't, again, air quotes here, as bad as someone else's. I didn't have this experience, so who am I to share mine? Like that to me is just my heart hurts a little bit when people think that way because it was me at one point, but I learned quickly like what's real to me is real to me. And I don't have to go through the same rock bottom as you to still experience those emotions, right? Or vice versa. Like I'm not going to sit here and say my rock bottom was worse than yours. It's not a pissing competition for lack of better analogies. It's Jonathan went through an experience, felt a lot of pain, ended up at a podcast. It's Caleb went through his own experience, experienced his version of pain, ended up at a mental health podcast. And I think that's what's beautiful too, is it doesn't matter the level of, again, air quotes, pain that you experience. It's the experience itself that brings us together. And I'm happy to hear that it's led you to so many wonderful people in your life. And you couldn't be more right again when you said, like, as long as it helps one person, that's enough. Because selfishly, there's some times where it probably only helps me, and that's enough to keep me going, right? Like some episodes help me more than they help anyone else, and I had to learn to be okay with that, and that it wasn't selfish to take what I need from providing for other people. But I kind of want to transition here in the last little part of this podcast episode to the golf mindset. Dun dun dun. Really scared. No, I'm kidding. I'm always very envious of people who play an individual sport because soccer is such a, you rely on everyone on the field, and one person making a mistake doesn't win or lose you the game, win or lose you the season. Um, Golf, however, tennis, bowling, any individual sport, I'm sure I missed a few. It's you, and in the case of golf, 500 yards of green sand and water. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, but at the same time, that's pretty dang bad. How do you just every day balance those mental hurdles? Because the best analogy I like to use is I watched a video on Instagram Reels over COVID. That's where I spent like half my waking day, which actually turned into a problem that I worked through with my therapist. But I watched a video that actually stuck with me. You can stand 6 feet away from the hole and you can put the ball in essentially 3 different ways. You can go straight at the hole and hope you don't miss and fly by. You can do some giant looping curve if the green has some tilt on it, or you can kind of go in the middle. I kind of use that approach to life, right? Like I try to break it down into those 3. The point being, you could stand in the same spot, give the same amount of power, the same line, and the ball's going to end up, if it's a degrees difference on the club head, 30 yards down wherever it lands. How do you manage that, man? Like that's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's wild. There's so much that goes into it, and I think it's like I love the challenge of it in that regard. Um, I think it's the perfect blend of life for me, and that it parallels beautifully. Um, it's like so not every day is the exact same, but some of the things that you're working on are, and it's the small things that add up over time. But you have to keep the big picture, essentially, right? In terms of mindset, what's always helped to me is to make it not about myself. Um, there are a lot of times you're out there for a long time, you're out there by yourself. Um, and you're like, why? Why am I out here? Right? There were times my freshman year, it was pitch dark. It's like 8:30 p.m. They've closed the golf course. I'm putting to a water bottle on the green, and like my flashlight is on the bottle just so I could see it. But it's those moments where I built some of my mindset now today, where it's right. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to win, to live the life that I want to live, to be the person that I want to be. Um, But in terms of making it not about myself, like I'm not thinking about that stuff there. I'm thinking about my family. I'm thinking about the people who I'm going to help down the road. And they need me to keep being the person that I am, not make the putt. Essentially, that's a little extreme, but not making it more, like making it more than just a putt. Right, this putt is for my mom. Like my mom is a huge reason why for me. Like my mom's my best friend. So um, I think about her a lot on the golf course because all the sacrifices that she's made for me, it's like I've got to go make it happen now to make them worthwhile for her. You do have to have a little bit of that killer instinct in golf, as every athlete does, but it's a lot different. I talk about it with my girlfriend a bunch because she's a gymnast and two very different sports. She is really good on the floor exercise. I'm actually about to go watch her compete in a little bit, but she's like all out for a minute and a half, right? She is full intensity, a little more physical than golf. um, but right, it's short bursts for her. Golf, you're out there for 5 hours. One round is 5 hours essentially. In our
Like
tournaments,
4 days in a row.
yeah, our tournaments we play 2 rounds the first day, so we're out there for 10 hours at least.
Jeez.
If you focus in short bursts, you're gonna be dead last because you're gonna give out. So you got to find a way to spread out your focus. You got to find a way to think about other things in between. It's very much so like playing that long game in that regard.
College can be a roller coaster, but Zant's got your back. First session, absolutely free. After that, just $25. Easy on the pocket, heavy on support. Stress, burnout, addiction, or trauma. Zant's expert coaches are here for you. Download the app, kick stress to the curb, and own your college journey. Your mental health, your way. Zant. Download and thrive today.
Yeah, and the first thing that came to my mind is the small details you mentioned, like with your flashlight over the water bottle on the green. That's a
Yeah.
great visual. I think it's an interesting kind of mindset to focus on the small aspects in the positive manner. How do you how do you switch it then and then forget about the small things in the negative manner, because that is a massive part of golf too. Like you want to
Yeah.
make those 10-yard putts last as long as possible, but you very quickly want to forget the shank into the water.
Yeah, you gotta have short-term memory for sure. And you really just learn it over time. There's not one thing that's I can't point to one event and be like, because I hit this shot, I suddenly had a short-term memory. Like that's not really true. It's something that you just work on and practice. Um, However, one thing that I have is a routine, and routine is huge in any sport for sure, especially in golf, because when you train it, you're training your mind more so than you're training your body. When I go out there and train, like when you get to a certain level, everyone can hit the ball good. Some people can hit the ball better, but everyone can hit the ball good enough. And what determines who succeeds is the mind, for sure. And the bigger the moment, the better your routine has to be. The more on autopilot you have to be, right? You're working to get into the subconscious part of your mind way more than the conscious. So my routine per se, right? If I've got an 8 iron in my hand, right, I always stand behind the ball. This is before I hit the shot. Like I'm visualizing my shot. I'm feeling a connection to the hole where I want the ball to land. I'm seeing how the ball is flying in the air. I'm feeling that in my hands. But then I'm always probably like 10 feet behind the ball when I'm doing that. And I always take 6 steps into the ball. So I always start with my left foot. And then after my third step, I cross over one. I have a think box and a play box essentially. So the think box, that's what I'm talking about. I'm visualizing the shot. I'm feeling the connection. I'm seeing what the ball needs to do. I'm feeling the wind. I'm painting that picture on my mind. That's the think box. I take my third step, and my fourth step I cross over into the play box, right? I'm not thinking about anything other than that golf ball, right? I'm just trying to hit the best shot that I can. I trust that I've put in the right work. I trust that my thinking, the thought process is there. I'm not trying to control anything else. I'm just going to make the best swing that I can and see where the ball goes. And more times than not, I'm going to hit a really good shot when I do that. And golfers are kind of notorious in the sense where we will literally take the same amount of time every single shot, like 21 seconds on repeat. Like it doesn't matter where we are. We can play anywhere in the world. It can be any weather. From when we're ready to go to when we hit the ball, it's 21 seconds or however many seconds that it is for you. Like it is the same every single time. And that's where the routine comes into play. And that doesn't just happen when you get on the golf course, right? You need to train that. You need to practice that. So not only are you training the physical aspects as I mentioned, but that's where training your mind is really huge. And it parallels right into life as well, right? If I have a test, I'm going to visualize succeeding on the test. Or if I'm going to go give a presentation and give a speech to a group of people about leadership development, I'm going to visualize how I'm walking. I'm going to visualize how I'm speaking. I'm going to visualize going through the slides and making connections and seeing all this stuff, because when I get into the environment, I never want something to happen for the first time. Right? I always want to visualize. I always want to be prepared. And that's really one of the biggest things that golf has taught me.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna start using that, my think box and my play box there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try that out with life, because much like you were saying, it's like you never want it to be the first time you're experiencing that. But then if it is the first time you're experiencing that in the moment, that's when the true growth happens. That's when you either let it go down a negative road or go down a positive road. And I'm not saying if you go down a negative road, you can never get out, but it's easier to start off on the right foot or the left foot in your case.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's literally, there's times where I have like a metronome going on in my mind, and it's literally the same four counts over and over and over. And some of the best rounds that I've ever played, like I don't even have, like, I'm not even thinking about stuff. I'm literally just on repeat for like 5 hours straight. It's literally the same four counts over and over and over.
Yeah, the closest parallel I can draw to soccer is a PK. We take the same amount of steps back. I have to place the ball a certain way, or a free throw in basketball. Anytime a team-based sport has an individual do something, it's just, again, you pick your spot and you pray the opponent doesn't know where it is, and if they do, you practice another side as well. But again, it's not the first time you're seeing it, right? Like I don't just line up and only shoot to the left. I also shoot to the right a little bit just to be prepared. But I wanted to ask you if there's anything else that you want our listeners to know about you, about your platform, about what you stand for, where they can reach you, where they can reach your platform. I mean, all those key questions I got asked the other day what I wanted my legacy to be. And that was a powerful question. Not quite that powerful for you, because I think it depends on what stage you are in life. Like, what do you want your legacy to be as a golfer? What do you want your legacy to be as a friend, a boyfriend, a son? Like, I think it's multifaceted, but I guess I'll ask you is, like, at this point in time, who are you and who do you hope people see you as? And then where can we find all the good stuff you've got going on?
That's crazy that you asked that, because every single podcast that I have, I always ask one question at the end, and it's how do you want to be remembered? And the most important part to that question is that every single student athlete that I've interviewed, not one person has answered anything along the lines of athletic ability. And that is a huge part to student athlete mental health, because we oftentimes get so engulfed into our performance as student athletes, what we're doing. And to a point, it's rightfully so, because we have to perform well to be on the team and everything along those lines. But it's not the end all be all. And when you take a step back and look at bigger picture, it's how do you want to make people feel? Who are you as a person? Everything that you just asked me along those lines. So I think that question is super impactful. For me, I want to be remembered by how I make people feel, for sure. I want to be remembered as just like, it's more so just like I embody anything that you think of me. It's like I am that. Like I don't want to ever limit myself to just um, a trait of vulnerability or a trait of humility, and all those things are definitely a certain aspect of me. But the biggest part about me is that everything that I do it for others, and that I do it so that someone else may not have to go through that everything that I went through, that someone else's life may be better impacted from mine. And my identity is definitely based on the Word of God, for sure. Um, I do believe it's like, for me, I am the light of the world, right? A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. I want to say that's Matthew 5:14. That is essentially who I am. Everything else along those lines, there are plenty more scripture verses that we could go into for sure. But for me, genuineness, right? I am who I say I am who God says I am. And it's for everyone else, like for everyone else is good. So that's really everything along those lines. That's all I want to say. I guess a word of encouragement, maybe, to all the listeners, right? No one can make the impact that you can make better than yourself. So whatever you go through, right, it's unique to you. It's unique to your platform that you will have down the road. And it's all worth it. So as Caleb mentioned, big on Instagram, Stories by Student Athletes. That's the podcast. I'll make sure my personal Instagram's tagged and everything else along those lines. But would love to connect. Whatever I can do to help. Very grateful for this platform as well. Caleb, you're doing a great work, and I feel like our stories are very similar. So it's great to be able to know that there are other people out there who go through similar stuff.
I appreciate that at the end there. And I just want to say, too, to anyone listening, if for some reason you connect with what Jonothan had to say better than with what any episode you've ever listened to mine, just jump on over, listen to his podcast, like do what's best for you. Both of us are not in this for the glory and we're not perfect in it. Trust me, by any means, at least I'm not. I can't speak for Jonothan, but we're still learning in the podcasting process. We're building that community. And as you referenced, I just want to send you some encouragement, because that town on the hill you referenced will be a city of light before you know it. So I just want you to have that visual. And I will ask you the final question here on the Make Mental Podcast episode with Jonothan. If there is one person who has made it this far into the episode, first of all, you're nuts. Second of all, we appreciate you. But if there's one person that's made it this far, and I'm going to make this tough for you, I haven't done this in a while, that is not your mom and is not your girlfriend or anyone you've mentioned in this episode, so any of those friends, that comes to mind that you're just like, man, you need a hug right now. Here's some love from me. Who would you give your hug to?
My grandpa. My grandpa was at every single baseball game that I ever played. And he texts me, calls me before every single golf round that I play. And he is a huge part of my reason why. And I'm sure that he is listening right now. So, Grandpa, I love you. Grandma, I know you're sitting right next to Grandpa, so I love you as well. And
she's like, "Where's my hug?"
Thank you, guys. I know. I'll give it to him soon. I'm going home for Easter.
Just a big group hug.
Absolutely.
I love that. Well, thank you again. Stories by Student Athletes. Go over, check it out. It's free to follow. It's free to show some love, because even if you are not experiencing these things, I can say with 100% positivity that someone in your life that follows you on social media needs to see what Jonothan is talking about. So there you have it. Thank you, Jonathan, for being a light for the past hour for me, and I know for so many others who are going to be blessed by this episode. We appreciate you, and good luck to your girlfriend on her floor routine.
Thank you.